Let's speak now to Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Director of the Iran Programme at the Foundation for the Defence of Democracies. Behnam, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. We'll come back to what President Trump has been saying in a couple of minutes. But first, what are you hearing about the situation for people inside Iran?
Pleasure to be with you. That's the million-dollar question right now, because all eyes, as far as we can tell, are still trained on the skies. There are many who believe in Iran still, that President Trump or Prime Minister Netanyahu would have their back after what we are seeing now, which was the greatest crackdown from the state against the street in not just the 47-year history of the Islamic Republic, but in the past century and a half of contemporary Iranian history, where there has really been a pitched battle for power in Iran. So right now there are wounds that are quite deep, that are quite lethal, much sense of unfinished business among large swaths of society against the state. And really looking past, the state propaganda of February 11th, the so-called Victory Day of the Islamic Revolution, and still hoping, projecting even views, values, and wishes onto some kind of foreign deliverance, which is quite odd for a nationalistic population like the Iranian population, but just goes to show you the sense of desperation that still exists after the crackdown.
Yes, because President Trump suggested that help was coming, didn't he? And it's difficult, of course, to figure out how people there interpreted that and what they think exactly he meant by that. But turning to this report of President Trump saying, if talks don't go well with the Iranians, these indirect talks in Oman, that he might send a second carrier group to the region, obviously putting on the pressure. Do you think it will work?
It depends a great deal as to what the end state for President Trump is. Several weeks ago, he said that his end game is to win. But how exactly does he intend to win, and what does winning look like? Those are still unanswered questions, I think, for the administration, which is right now quite content, if you ask me, to have both allies and adversaries trying to guess where they may go next. Certainly, President Trump is bringing more assets into the region. The Islamic Republic's hardline elite is increasingly seeing that as a knife being sharpened up against it. But the Iranian people don't want this to be just posturing either at the same time. Like you said, they believe that help was on the way. They believe that the U.S. was going to be holding their oppressors for this crackdown responsible. So again, lots of anxiety at the moment.
We've only got about 30 seconds. Obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, on his way to Washington for talks with President Trump. How influential will he be in determining what President Trump does next, do you think?
I, for one, believe that there is no nuclear deal off-ramp to the crisis, because the crisis is a humanitarian one. But even prior to these protests, or in the very early phases of these protests, Trump and Bibi met, I believe, in Mar-a-Lago in late December 2025. And it seemed like the president was giving a pale green light to the Israelis, not on the nuclear threat posed by the Islamic Republic, but on the lingering ballistic missile threat. And I think we are going to be seeing more pressure from Israel to hold America to account for that line on the missile threat.
Thank you very much, Behnam Ben Taleblu.